When you travel the world as much and for as long as I have, you repeatedly catch sight of just one topic. That's the human being. The fact is, we all believe we're truly distinct. The reality is that all 7 billion of us are all the same. I would say that there are between 500 and 1,000 distinct types of humans in the world. I'm one of them, and so are you. Clues are everywhere. The reality is that no one sees them. A clue could be as simple as a glance or a toothbrush. It could be a painting, a photograph, or how a family's shoes are arranged. Just as distinct as a drop of blood, a person's home is a true reflection of their spirit. It's not just what you see, it's how it's placed. Clue gathering is not linear. Some clues lead nowhere. Some clues are so small that even I don't notice them at first. I call these clues, these insights into people's lives, small data. I listen to what people like and what they don't like, what they need and what they really want. The pieces of the puzzle come together and create an entirely new picture. In the end, everything boils down to one simple thing: the consumer. And no matter how insignificant consumer observations may appear to be, I've learned that every single thing we do in life, consciously or unconsciously, reveals incredible insights about who we really are. I'm not a trained psychologist or a detective or a forensic investigator. I'm a compulsive collector of clues, an explorer of small data. Well, thank you so much, Christoph, for your amazing introduction. Hey, everyone out there. You're all sitting behind your screens, and so am I. I'm actually not in the United States. I'm in Switzerland. Can you believe it? But who cares? Because I guess the world is truly global right now. Now, do you know what? What's amazing about what has happened right now is that consumers have completely changed their behavior. In P&G language, many years ago, I remember you worked with something called entry points. The idea of that we have 7 entry points throughout life. An entry point is the first time I go to school, or the first time I get married, or when I retire, or when I get my first job. All of those are what I call entry points. And what entry points have in common is that they are profoundly changing our entire behavior. So let's say that I'm expecting a newborn baby. Suddenly, you know the drill. Suddenly there's baby strollers everywhere, baby equipment everywhere. It's crazy. Where did that come from? That is the magic of an entry point. So why do I tell you about this? I tell you about this because something has changed. Probably for the first time in recent memory, we are for the first time in recent memory experiencing an 8th entry point. An 8th entry point is due to a global synchronized behavioral consumer change. A change we've never seen before, to such an extent happening globally almost at the same time. And that entry point is going to create a domino effect of changes both in the way we develop products, services, and of course, brands. Now, let me just tell you a story. Just when COVID-19 hit the world, I was in Sydney. And I remember I was down at the local butcher buying some stuff, and this old lady came up to me, and she just passed by me and went straight for a dog, and she started to pet this strange dog. Now, she didn't know the dog. It was an old lady. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. Well, guess what? The day after, I saw exactly the same happening another place. A person going up petting a stranger's dog. And in fact, it did not happen twice. It happened over the first month. I was calculating during the month of March. I saw 9 people approaching dogs in a way I never seen before. Now, you may think, oh, well, okay, well, that's a coincidence. But I believe in something I call small data. Small data is what I define as seemingly insignificant observations you make in people's daily lives. And quite often, these observations, as small as they seem, indicates a profound change in our behavior. Because why did this happen? Well, first of all, let me put it into a perspective. I fundamentally believe that we have five senses for the purpose of using them: sense of smell and touch, taste, sound, and sight. But as you and I are now sitting behind a screen and we really can't touch anyone, we're not even allowed to touch people anymore. Little can we smell things or people. And yes, taste is still there, but for sure the sense of touch is gone. What is happening in our daily lives is that we get out of balance. And it's the out of balance which is representing the opportunity for a new product or a new brand. So let me give you an example about being out of balance. Out of balance is I feel overweight. Well, guess what? There's Weight Watchers as a brand for that. Or maybe I feel I have my midlife crisis at the age of 45 as a man. Well, guess what? There's Harley Davidson for you, right? So an out of balance is typically what's defining when there's a new opportunity happening. Your role as a marketeer, as an innovator, as a brand builder is to understand what are those out of balances. And they're happening everywhere. Which really leads me back to what I experienced when I was seeing these old ladies and people in general petting strangers' dogs. They were out of balance with the sense of touch. There was an experiment done 7 years ago where scientists were given two sets of rats. In the first part of the experiment, rats, in fact 20 rats, were touched and petted every half an hour throughout the entire experiment, taking around 1 month. But there was a twist to this. The second set of rats were never touched during the whole experiment. Yes, they received food, water, but they were never touched. Guess what happened? Within the first 10 days, 13% of the rats died in the second control group. And by the end of the experiment, more than half of the rats had died. And this leads me back to our reality. The organ touch is the strongest and biggest organ we have. In fact, it's the biggest because our entire body is one big sensory touch organ. But when we are suppressing ourselves from touch, and I don't need to tell you, Brazil is certainly the case here, but also all the other countries in Latin America, now being such a touch-based community, is cut away from the sense of touch. What happens? But what we know today is that we start to crave touch. And that leads me straight back to this old lady touching the dog. I'm not sure you're aware of it, but dog sales in the Western world has increased more than 250%. Yes, of course, there's one reason why people feel alone. But there's a second reason why we need to touch people. We need to touch things and animals. In fact, an experiment done in Japan, which I was involved with many years ago, with old people across senior homes in Japan, showed us that old people die quicker if they're not touching things. That's the reason why, and this is typical Japanese, you know how they are, the Japanese people invented the automatic robot seal. You know Japanese people, right? The Japanese developed a seal, fluffy, nice seal, which they gave to the senior people so they could touch it. And in fact, life expectancy over the period of 10 years have increased 13% among those people part of the experiment. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the answer to everything is to give people a robot seal, right? That's not the answer. But what I'm saying is that we need to be very aware of how important the sense of touch is. And this leads me back to a skill set I would encourage you strongly to work on, which is to find the small data. Now, let me just first of all define what the difference is between big data and small data. Big data is all about correlation, connecting the dots. Small data is all about causation, the reason why. the hypothesis. One people is saying to me, well, all the answers in the future will be big data. That's probably not true, because big data very quickly can conclude that it in fact starts to rain more if you're selling more umbrellas, which is a typical big data conclusion. So you always need to have small data first. And the skill set you guys need to build. And I know that P&G has been really good at developing ethnographic methodologies, but the next generation after that is to observe even more extremes of how people decorate their homes, how they design their lives, how they gesticulate, because all those things are going to reveal amazing insights. Over the last 15 years, I've spent time in more than 600 homes across Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. And what I've learned is that small data, more than anything else, is going to create the competitive advantages compared to everyone else. Do you know why? Because everyone else believes they can read things through numbers, but you can't. Because we have to still use the instinct. An instinct for me is an accumulation of experiences through many years, and that gives us an insight which the competitors can't follow. So big data, yeah, it's great when you want to verify the small data, but it's not a good starting point. Let me just take back in time. In 2004, the Lego company realized that they've been doing something wrong. They've been listening to all these big data through many years, and they learned that the instant gratification generation had arrived. These kids basically had no patience whatsoever to play with Lego. So Lego decided to change these tiny Lego bricks to gigantic building blocks. Christmas 2004 was a disaster for Lego. Sales during Christmas went down 30%, and Lego was close to bankruptcy. That was the day I received a call from the management. They said, hey, we have a problem. How do we get back on track? How do we figure out another way of creating a point of differentiation? So we went back to small data. We had a little outbreaker group inside Lego, and we started to spend time in consumer homes. And this is a true story. We actually end up in a home of an 11-year-old German boy. And I'll never forget it, because we're sitting on the floor, and one of the members from Lego asked this question, one single question to this kid. What are you most proud of? And the kid was pausing for a second, and then he pointed to a shoe which were stocked on a shelf, an old worn down pair of sneakers. And of course, we were completely perplexed, thinking, why is he answering this? Why didn't he say Nintendo, PlayStation, or Sony, or anything like this? No, an old worn down pair of sneakers. So of course, we asked the kid, why? And the kid, he paused for a second, and he said, because I'm the best skater in town, and this is my evidence. You see, if you're a really good skateboarder and you slide down the skateboard, you create a certain angle of wear and tear on the side of that sole. And it's exactly that angle he created, which were the evidence that he was the best skater in town. And that was the moment where Lego had kind of a eureka moment, because they realized if a kid is willing to spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours playing with this angle of a shoe to become the best skater in town, why wouldn't the kid be willing to spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours playing with Lego? So we went back to the drawing board. We changed those big gigantic bricks to tiny bricks. We changed the entire assortment of Lego. And we also introduced the Lego movie. And the Lego movie, 5 years later, became the biggest success of all time for Lego. And by the way, the second highest ranking movie that year. Lego today is the largest toy brand in the world. The brand is 7 times more valuable than number 2. But that's really not the story. What the story is that Lego was reconnecting with the consumer. And I want to say to you guys here and now that as we all stuck behind the screens, we are seduced to believe that we can do everything from at home. We can control and monitor the consumer through a remote control. But nothing could be further from the truth. And let me just give you an example about what I mean. What we've learned is there's three things you need to have in mind. One, you need to have in mind that the senses play a profound impact, and the P&G portfolio of brands is certainly no exception. How do you do this when you're not spending time with the consumers? But the second thing I've learned is equally important. You need to identify the outer balances because they're everywhere. That's where you pick up these small pieces of data. But the third point is even more important. And that is the point that innovation quite often is killed, not by the consumer, but because of you. So let me just take you back in time. Many years ago, the CEO of McDonald's, the former CEO of McDonald's, Charlie Bell, reached out to me and he had a question. He said, I would like you to redesign the Happy Meal. And I said, well, yeah, that would be great. I just have one condition for you guys. I would like you to make it healthy. And Charlie was a good man. So he said, yeah, please go for it. So we started to do consumer insight, and I realized that the objectives should be very human. And this is, by the way, really good advice to you guys. The objectives you should run should not necessarily be money or number driven. It should be a human metaphor you can relate to. My metaphor for McDonald's was very simple. We wanted to create a Happy Meal containing broccoli. We wanted to have a 6-year-old being willing to and loving eating broccoli. Get that, right? So what we did was we went back to the drawing board. And we realized through our research that in the end of the day, storytelling is really the power tool to change things. So we created this amazing concept. We literally had this spaceship, and it was in cardboard. And inside the spaceship, you will have numbers in the bottom of the spaceship. And then you'll have vegetables and cucumbers and tomato on top of it. And you could basically collect and build your own burger with the tongue. And once you sort of eating everything, there would be numbers underneath, and you could release a spaceman. Or we would have another example, another concept where you would be having to hunt out in the forest, and where the bushes in the forest will be broccoli, and the tomatoes will be the murder blot, and the weapon will be the cucumber. And we would use all these elements in vegetables as power tools to create a narrative. We then released the product as a pilot in Germany, and kids absolutely loved it. They were eating broccoli as never before, and Paris absolutely loved it. It was amazing, and the franchisees absolutely loved it. Everyone loved it. So I thought, oh wow, this is success. I'm going back to the headquarters of McDonald's outside Chicago, and we're going to make this become global. So I presented the idea, and they said to me, it's interesting. Let me just pause here for a second. If any one of you here in your life wants the word interesting when dealing with Americans, it basically means it's rubbish. Interesting means forget about it. Well, I didn't know that. I was from Europe, right? So I thought, wow, they think it's interesting. They worked on it for 2 years. And then finally I came to the release of the new Happy Meal. And guess what it was? It was a Happy Meal as we know it, the usual box with the burger and the soda and the fries, now including an apple. And this is my point. Innovation is worth nothing if you're not working with what I define as the immune system internally in your organization. You guys working with innovation, you can come up with the most brilliant ideas, but the immune system is a defense mechanism for change. And quite often, those brilliant ideas you had are slowly watered down. And let me just try to give you an example about what I mean with that. What I mean with that is an example I had many years ago when I was asked by the ruler of Dubai in UAE to rebrand UAE. It's one of these calls where you think, is this a joke, right? The guy, he called me and he said, Mr. Lindstrom, I'd like you to come to UAE and help me to build the brand of Dubai. Now, this is many years ago. It's 18 years ago. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Well, not the American version, but the European version. So I went on a plane to Dubai. Back then, by the way, there was no tall buildings. It was flat. I think there was about 200,000 people living there. It was very different from what you know today. So we went out in the desert. And this gentleman I met up with was a very well-known business owner in Dubai. His name was Majid Al Fatem. And Mr. Majid and I went out in the desert, and he had a vision. We went out in the desert. It was really hot. I don't need to tell you. So Mr. Majid, he said to me, Mr. Lindstrom, what do you think? I said, it is hell. My God, it's warm out here. I mean, I was dressed in black as I always am. And he said, so what's your concept idea? I said, why don't we make it cold? And out of that, we created what we call Ski Dubai, a ski slope in the middle of the desert. Some of you guys may even have heard about it. But let me just pause here for a second, because this comes back to my point around innovation. And let me just explain this. I'm going to share a model with you. I don't think you'll ever forget this model. Here you have a innovation. And what we can see is with this innovation that it has 4 sharp corners. And each of these different corners really represents a powerful brand. So in the case of Ski Dubai, they would have a real ski slope in the middle of the desert. They would have real ski mountains in the middle of the desert. They would have real ski cabins flown in from Austria in the middle of the desert. And by the way, they would have real live penguins in the middle of the desert. Great idea, a bit crazy, do you agree? Particularly when no one in the world ever had done this before. So we went back, and this is what happens. Oh yeah, we love this idea with real ski slopes in the middle of the desert, but do we really need to have, it's cold inside and warm outside? But kids will get a cold, and parents will lose sight of these kids. And by the way, the kids will fall and drop themselves and break a leg in the middle of the snow. And oh, what about those poor penguins? Can't we change the penguins to become robot penguins instead? And by the way, I have a better idea. Why don't we change the whole thing to become a computer game? Let's have fun in the snow in the middle of the desert. No, I have an idea. Why don't we change it to become sort of a pamphlet, which is talking about how fun it will be to have snow in the desert? You get what I mean? Slowly, the concept started to fall apart. Those 4 corners, creating a true point of differentiation, died. And this is exactly what I tried at McDonald's. We had a great idea, but the immune system, the fear of making a change happen, slowly was eating like cancer and destroying these ideas, which were linked back to the consumer inside. What did we do at Majid Al Fatem? Well, what we did was that we were very focused on one single idea, never to compromise it. And this is my point to you guys. You guys are sitting in innovation. You have brilliant ideas, I'm sure. But how much time do you spend on activating the need and breaking down the immune system at the rest of the P&G side? So they are not killing your ideas, but they stay strong. Because I bet you guys have experienced so many times that you came up with this amazing idea only to see a shadow of it later on being introduced. And even worse, you knew your idea actually was right, but it never had the opportunity to show the daylight. Now, this brings me back to COVID-19 and what's going on right now. Because as we talked about, we are out of balance. There's really 3 things we're seeing happening right now, which I think are profound. 1, the senses have never been suppressed as much as we've seen before. 2, we're locked into our home, which means we are doing transitions in another way we never done before. Let me just pause here for a second. Throughout life, we go through transition, and transition dictates the perception of time. I mean, it sounds crazy, but let me give you an example. How many of you have tried that when you travel from destination A to B, for some reason it feels longer than if you travel from destination B to A? So going back, it sounds much quicker than going to that destination. Well, that's because our brain is recording the information on the first path and then it's rendering it back on the second path, so the perception of time is changing. What we know today is that the more shifts of scenes I have, the slower time goes. The more shifts we have of changes in our environment, the slower time goes. Now, let me just explain that for a second. It means that we actually can manipulate the sense of time. The reason why people sitting at home during COVID-19 felt suddenly that time was going unbelievable fast was not because it was going faster than normal. It's because there's no change of scene. It's almost like we rendered the surroundings into our computer brain, and in the end of the day, we're seeing the same old, so suddenly time is going faster. And that is the reason why your mother or your grandmother, if she's very old, is saying, oh, time goes so fast. And you're thinking, how can it go fast? She's sitting in the same chair. That is the reason why if you go on a holiday, you should change hotel every third day. I'm sure you tried it. You go on a weekend trip for just 2 days. And guess what? When you come back again, you're saying, my God, that was like I've been away for a week or two. So the second thing we experience is that the perception of time is changing with consumers. That means the way you communicate to consumers now have to change as well. Our attention span is down the drain. We literally need to be captured through other means. The third thing comes back to fear. Fear is a bit scary because fear activates the amygdala in our brain. And with that, it means that we actually would be overridden by fear and have no common sense in what we do. What happens is that fear is so profound that we suddenly cannot think in a logic way. And fear is accumulative. The more fear you expose for, the more you are aware of it and on alert all the time for more fear. Meaning, if you have someone breaking into your home, I'm pretty sure that you will say to yourself the second time, oh, I'm more on alert. In fact, when you walk out on the street, you are more on alert, even though it's nothing to do with what happened in your home. Fear accumulates fear. The media is generating more fear than ever. COVID-19 is generating fear. I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being excluded from my tribe. And the tribe is really an issue because as we stuck behind our screens, we feel we disconnected from the world. I feel alone. I feel no sense of purpose. And it's the no sense of purpose, which is a huge issue right now because we're seeing sadly that the numbers of suicides increasing across the world is going up more than 300%. That means you as a brand should not just go out and sell a shampoo or sell a shaving or sell something else. You should sell a very strong sense of purpose, much stronger than anything else. But with that, you also have another opportunity, that is to see the world in a different light. Let me just give you an example. In Sydney, in Australia, and in Melbourne, there was this new startup company which realized by picking up small data that people felt increasingly alone at home. They also realized that people wanted to express their creativity more and change the colors of the wall. Do you know why? Because people subconsciously were out of balance. They wanted to create more transitions in their life, so they changed the perception of time. Now, it's not something you can make people say. You can only see it by picking up small data. As they realized that, they also realized the biggest opportunity ever is to create a paint company. Not the usual paint company, but a paint company which is based on the principle of you identifying beautiful colors from at home and ordering it online. The company is called Tint, and the little device they developed, which is the same size as a memory stick, is called a Pico. And the Pico is very simple because it plugs into the essence of the need you have when you're at home. I mean, how many times haven't you tried that you have an apple and it has a certain color and you want to match the wall with that color, and you can't take the whole apple with you down to the paint store. And by the way, you can't do it because you're afraid of COVID. Well, what these guys did was to create the little memo stick, the little Pico, and you put it on the apple or you put it on the wall, and it measures exactly the color which is in use. And that number will now digitally be sent to the paint store, to the tint store. They will produce the paint and send it to you. Suddenly, they created an innovation spinning out of COVID-19. They've seen sales raise so much so that the company already after 3 months is break even. And right now, it's going on an IPO in 3 months. And this is my point to you guys, that we are surrounded by small data everywhere. And these small data has never been more profound than they are right now, because we are going through a global synchronization. And that global synchronization is leading to an 8th entry point. And that 8th entry point is leading to amazing new opportunities. Let me just tell you a little story about opportunities and seeing things in a different light. Because one of the things what I certainly have learned which are changing is our relationship to anxiety. Anxiety is everywhere, and we certainly have seen and felt that over the last couple of months. Now, the airline company called Swiss International Airlines, based here in Switzerland, approached us some time ago, and they said, hey, we would like you to help us change our accuracy of time. Now, this sounds crazy for you guys, but here's the reality. The reality is that time is actually very important for airline companies. And even though Swiss is perceived as being on time, they actually are ranking number 18 in Switzerland as being the most accurate airline company. So they had a little bit of a problem. So they came up to us and they said, hey, what can you do? Now, here's what we did. We decided to join Swiss as an employee. I became a purser serving the plane, and I had to do that over the last 15 years alone. I spent time in more than 2,500 consumer homes around the world. And in many cases, I become one of the people working in the functions for several weeks to understand how the consumer psychology is. Now, here's the issue. How would you differentiate an airline one from another? Well, typically, if you do a conventional research study using big data, you would conclude that you can differentiate yourself with better leg rooms, right? Better catering, right? Better entertainment system, right? Well, I tell you, I would be fired if I gave you that solution as a consultant to you guys, right? But what we realized as we started to interview people was that the number one emotional driver where people were out of balance was neither those things. It was anxiety. People more than ever felt, and still today feel, anxious when flying. If we could solve that, we would create a point of differentiation. So here's what we did. We took all the people from the Swiss International Airlines, the cabin crew, the pilots, the captain, the luggage carousel managers, the ground handling staff. We took them with us out in the real world. And we started to spend time in passengers' homes. Never ever done before in history of these guys. Never done before. And what we learned was subtly profound. We learned anxiety. I'm going to share with you a video now. Just take a look at this. If you can roll the Swiss video. This is a 2-minute video giving you a sense of what we did. We are becoming a commodity. We're now starting to look like everyone else. Same prices, same seats, same catering. Why should I pay more?
If we want it better for us as well as for the passenger, we have to change some stuff.
How are you feeling?
Really feeling a little bit nervous because I don't know what's going on today.
I don't usually see Swiss come up too often.
The purpose of this project is to infuse the Swissness back to Swiss, to get people out of the chicken cage and make very courageous decisions which I never made before.
I do hope that we really found something that the whole world is going to talk about it.
To build a culture.
We need change to bring Swiss back in the game.
But this is not an idea developed by the office people. It's in partnership, and we've never seen that before, where passion is leading it, and where we unlock hospitality, which is the key of this company.
I like this exchange of teams, with the flying personnel and me being on the ground.
How would you describe today?
Challenging.
It's absolutely great to feel this huge energy and also creativity.
People should spread the news within the company.
This is going to be the start of a movement for us working together in a way we've never done before.
I'm a strong promoter of Swissness because I'm deeply convinced that we have to strengthen our brand.
We were all overwhelmed of the ideas and the creativity in all the teams.
It was so impressive to see the result of what you guys all did and people on the ground together and just to feel the spirit. One of the winners is
anxiety. Second team who makes it to the next round is
hospitality.
Really keen to see what will be next.
So what we learned from this experience was pretty profound. We learned that anxiety was the word. So here's my question. How do you translate that into a concept? Well, very simple. We worked with every touch point in the organization to have them buy into the concept of anxiety by systematically removing it. Here's what's happening today when you fly with Swiss. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain on board Swiss International Airlines. I have the pleasure of announcing that we will descend into New York's JF Kennedy within the next 10 minutes and will be on ground in around 40 minutes from now on. Now, as you are on ground, I just want to tell you that you will arrive at gate 107. Now, it may not tell you a lot, but in fact, it's only 7 minutes walk from immigration. And by the way, I've just been on call with the head of immigration, informing that the waiting time right now is only 12 minutes. And even better, I just spoke with the head of luggage control and luggage control, and they informed me that there's only a waiting time for 15 minutes to get your luggage. That means you'll be through the system in around 15 minutes with a bit of luck. Now, even better, I was just on Waves. You know Waves, the app system controlling the traffic. Well, it tells me that there's only a 49-minute drive from the airport into Manhattan. So if this is your home, you'll be back home, safe again in about 2 hours time from now on. I hope you enjoyed flying Swiss International Airlines. Think about that. What would you think about Swiss if that happened? You suddenly would say, my God, these guys are always on time. And what's interesting is, yeah, it may be it was only 30 minutes waiting time or 40 minutes waiting time in immigration. It doesn't matter. The fact that Swiss is talking about it, informing about it, they become the masters of time. And this is my message back to you guys. You cannot just develop a product or perhaps even a service. You have to embed yourself into the system of your immune setup in order to have people buying into all this stuff. We actually went even further. As I was spending time walking the aisles as a purser serving food, I've thought about, why don't we try to change another aspect of time? As everyone was boarding, all passengers left the plane, I was sitting there with my team, and we were just looking at the cleaning crew coming on board on the plane cleaning. And we realized that every cleaning member would take the armrest up, clean with a vacuum cleaner, and take it down again. And I said to one of my colleagues, well, tell me, how much time does it take for people to take it up and down? What if we just kept it up? Just try to measure how long time does it take for a passenger to walk in and sit on the seat. We learned that in fact by having the armrest up and keeping it up, we're saving around 6 seconds per row, which adds up to around 6.5 minutes for an entire plane. We introduced it, we implemented it, and Swiss went from number 18 to number 13 with just one initiative. And this is my point to you guys. Brand innovation, product innovation cannot just stop with a beautiful package design of a shampoo. It has to be much more holistic, and it has to tap into the changes in our society. It has to tap into what we learn right now with COVID-19, the lack of our senses, the feeling alone, the fear. All those aspects are going to define human mankind over the next many years to come, sadly. But you guys can't stop there. You need to take the executives from P&D with you into the homes. You need to pick up these small data. And then you need to take them through this process, ensuring that they're not rounding the corner. Because once you round the corner, your concept is slowly dying and is not justifying you. So, 3 simple but important pieces of advice. Number 1. When you create innovation today, you need to be observant around the 8th entry point and understand what is that. Build up a model around it and let that become your driving force within the lab. 2, be aware of that you have an immune system, and that immune system will kill whatever you do. So bring the senior people with them into homes or interactions through the screen where you clearly feel the empathy of the consumer. 3, make sure that you tap into the outer balances and systematically build it into your concept, but you also make the concept become holistic. You don't just stop with a pack design or a box or a shampoo bottle. You go further and further and further so it becomes a holistic experience. And then don't round the corners. Stick with it and make that become your mantra. You have to fight for it, but I've learned one thing, it pays off in the end of the day. Because in my opinion, what's really interesting is that we need to believe in ourselves. The reason why you're sitting in your role is not just because you're good at coming with ideas. It's because you have a sharp eye for opportunities and that you believe in it and you can push it through the system. And that is just as important as coming up with the ideas. That's what I learned many years ago with McDonald's, and it's certainly a mistake I'll never do again. Christoph, I'll hand over the word back to you. I know you have a lot of questions, right? So please shoot any questions you will at me.
Yes, Martin, thank you very much. And sorry, I mean, you are in Switzerland, so it's a night call for you. But, you know, still, you're in Switzerland, that's a beautiful country, so, you know, I apologize halfway, all right? We have a few questions, and I'm going to start with one of them, which is, in this new world where we had to reinvent the way we do research by using virtual and digital tools, what are your thoughts on the quality and speed of product innovation?
Well, it's a very good question, by the way. I think there's 2 things to say. First of all, what we have done at my company is that we are mixing insight from real physical visits and observations, because sometimes we can't get into the homes or into the countries, with virtual visits in the home, and where we have people walking around with the phones, showing us fridges, showing us things. But we are always mixing it as much as we can, because you can't rely on the screen alone. That's the first thing. So in terms of consumer insight, you can use screen-based research to some extent, but don't rely on it 100%, because you're going to cut away your biggest asset, which is the senses, right? The second dimension to this is that you should expect being much faster to innovate than you ever done before. And what I would do if I was you is to prime people internally in the organization and secure a mandate. There's 3 things I would do. The first thing is define what the 8 entry points are and communicate that through the P&G system and have everyone buy into it. Because once they buy into it, you don't need to go back and start to be challenged by, is this right or wrong? This is the first thing. You can do that already now. And I can tell you what is coming out as a consequence of the 8th entry point will stay there for many years to come. The second thing I would do is I would work on developing solutions which are like small pilots. And I would not be afraid of you mixing it up. I will call your products for beta. I will send them out very quickly in small areas, work with local communities and see and feel the reaction. But I would turn it around within months. Now, I know this is very difficult because you guys typically are very slow and it takes a year or even more to develop new products. You cannot continue doing that. It has to happen incredibly fast. So you need to almost do this pilot testing, these innovation boxes and send it out very quickly. And it has to be so profound, so fast because of 2 reasons. The first is if you do it fast, the immune system inside P&G cannot stop it because it's going so fast that they sort of forget about, wow, woo, is it already real? And the second reason is that all other companies are completely paralyzed with sitting behind screens, not knowing what they're doing. The third thing is equally important. Celebrate a success. When you have a little small win out there, don't let it just disappear. Create big fanfares internally, celebrate it, give people awards, do anything you can to say, hey, what you guys did was amazing. And those people involved are amazing. And this is exactly what we learned because it creates precedence internally in the company. And it almost helps you to avoid rounding corners for the next round you're doing because you get more and more credibility. And I think a lot of companies, as you're stuck behind the screens, forget about the third point, which is really dangerous. Christophe?
Thank you very much. Very good perspective. I liked your comment about P&G being slow. We are trying to get better, but yes, I mean, you're pointing your fingers on something we need to improve.
Christophe, can I ask you, what is your innovation cycles now? How many months is it?
Well, it depends what you're talking about, but we have, it depends of the kind of size of innovation.
Completely new product innovations.
But we are looking now at, I would say, 12 months, and we are doing lean experiments. So what you're talking about, learning within days, actually, learning with the consumers, formulating from one day to the other and learning extremely fast. Now, in all fairness, and there will be another question about this, we have some bureaucracy that once we have the solution may slow us down, but we are trying. I mean, we are embracing this concept of lean innovation to go faster. And you probably see many more innovation coming from Procter faster. Gabo, I think you have another question.
Yes, I do. Hi, Martin. So
Hi, Gabriel.
The second question would be, what do you see as the biggest risks and opportunities related to COVID-19?
I think the biggest risks are that people use it as an excuse for not changing. I'll give you an example. We work with some of the largest supermarket chains around the world doing innovation, and one of the clients we have is Lowe's in the United States. We completely changed the entire chain over a 6-year period and created this amazing retailer, which today is the fastest growing retailer in the United States. I just spoke to the president recently, and I said to him, so what have you learned from COVID-19? And he said, listen, what I've learned is that the innovation which took 6 years for us to do back in the days, which made us become who we are today, we did exactly the same degree of innovation in 6 weeks because of COVID-19. What I've learned is you have to use the moment right now as an opportunity to change. I'll give an example from our own little world, just as a metaphor. When this was hitting the world, I was sitting in Australia. I decided to write an ebook. The ebook is called The Biology for Coronavirus World. And by the way, all of you guys are invited to download a free copy of it, and hopefully you will learn something from it. But I wrote the book more or less for fun, okay? What happened was really interesting. As I released the book, more than 1 million people downloaded the book straight after. 1 million, which is a really high number when you think about it. And not only that, We actually were forced to change our entire business model because of it. I used the moment to transform our organization. My question is, and this is what Tim, the president from Lowe's, said to me, if you do not change when you go through COVID-19 and create a profound new business model, you did not get the message. You have to change completely and use COVID in many ways like an excuse to change your business model. That's what we saw from Tint and the Pico model, where they actually changed the entire paint industry over just 3 months. So my challenge back to you guys is, how have you profoundly changed your business model? How you profound change the way you do innovation? And one of the things I would ask myself for you guys, if I was sitting with you guys somewhere in Brazil, would be, how can you create a new way of interacting with the bureaucracy in P&G so you are not sitting in a bubble, brilliant as you are, creating all these lean, amazing projects, which is for some reason going through this thing when it ends up in the corporate headquarters in Cincinnati or wherever it ends up. And this is where I would put a lot of innovation into it, because I actually don't think you have to change that much. I think it's the line between you and headquarters was have to change, the way you engage the immune system. And I think COVID-19 can force you to do that. You can either say, well, it's impossible because we're behind the screen now, or you can choose to say, okay, well, we're all behind the screen. Let's find another methodology of working together.
Thank you, Martin. I'm sure that we will have some thinking mode during this weekend, and potentially we will be sending also the link for people to download your book, and we'll have some reading this weekend. So now I know that we have a third question. So Christoph?
That was a great, of course that's a great answer, but your points about, changing the way we innovate, we are forced, to change the way we were operating, because we cannot talk with consumers we were talking. And by the way, you're probably aware, the way the company is organized with focus market and enterprise market is exactly to try to liberate maybe the faster moving markets like enterprise market from the bureaucracy we can have in Cincinnati. But this takes me to this question, which are actually two questions in one. Do you foresee a slower pace of meaningful innovation, the one that consumers subconsciously need, due to a lack of empathy from face-to-face consumer research during the pandemic? So that's question number one. And then probably question number two, which is related to what you are talking about regarding bureaucracy. This person is saying, I see you have a new book coming out about how to eliminate bureaucracy, red tape, and corporate BS, which means bullshit. Seems like something that could be helpful to us in P&G. Any tips you can share now about making these changes and tasks easier in the future? So there are two questions in one.
Thanks, Christoph. Well, listen, first of all, I think it's fair to say that, yes, consumer insight will probably change quite a lot because of all this stuff. And I think that the deep insight will not be as of a good quality as it once was. I think those companies which really do it and continue doing it, they will actually show up to be the winners. But I think the majority will just not get it. But here's what's interesting. I think technology, on the other hand, will speed up things. We've never seen technology adopt as much as it does now. So I would claim that things from an innovation point of view will actually go faster than we ever seen before, as soon as and as long as technology is involved. When it comes to conventional products where technology is not involved, it will go slower. So I think we will have two different graphs going on here. I think what you will have to do is, of course, to embed technology into these things. And I'm sure you're very familiar with what L'Oreal did, where they can have virtual makeups on people. And they're basically taking clicks and mortar and combining it. And as soon as they went into that space, which have been very, very successful for them, the whole thing of innovation was speeding up 3 times as much as it was before. In terms of empathy, it's actually a topic I'm talking a lot about in my new book. And that book, by the way, is called The Ministry of Common Sense. And it's a book which I wrote because I felt, as you just said, Christoph, there's so much bureaucracy going on in our world right now. And that bureaucracy really is killing initiatives, it's killing creativity. And I think a lot of people are deeply frustrated about their daily lives. So I decided to write this book. And I don't want to tell you a lot because The book is released the 19th of January around the world, so maybe we should catch up again later on and I'll give you some hints. But one thing I can tell you is we actually are creating ministries of common sense within companies today, physical functions with the sole purpose of removing the lack of common sense. And as soon as they start up those ministries, we actually have seen the productivity is increasing with up to 300%. Because suddenly it's removing that stretch jacket, which is holding people back from breathing and being innovative and creative. So the hint I'll give you is you should consider opening a ministry of common sense internally with the sole purpose of removing stupidities and bureaucracy and compliance and regulatory issues which are not adding value. Now, I don't need to tell you, Christoph, you know what I mean. This is very sensitive what I'm talking about here. But I know for a fact that those companies which are navigating in an environment where there is a very little bureaucracy are the ones which are winning right now. So this is a little bit of a teaser. Hopefully it's also give you a little bit of a hint of what to do.
Very, very exciting. I think that actually you have opened my appetite. I want to read this book because, I mean, yes, it's sensitive, but it's reality and we need to confront reality and make some of the status quo go away. So thanks very much for this perspective. I think we have a last question, Gabor?
Yes, we do. And Martin, as we have watched your speech and you talk a lot of small data, I believe we can correlate this with this question that comes through our organization. So the question is, do you have any learnings about products consumers think as commodities? For example, in Brazil, consumers go in an autopilot to buy feminine hygiene pads, and value equation is very important to them. Can you please share any advice?
I'm going to tell you some pretty dramatic facts. I don't think the concept of global brands will exist in the future. Yes, there'll be the odd fews. There'll be a Tide, there'll be a Coca-Cola, there'll be an Apple. But in general, we will not see global brands appearing in the future. They're simply too expensive to maintain, and they're not mirroring the local needs in the local market space. I think the key changes we're seeing right now around the world is that the empowerment of local communities is growing. Some of the most successful concepts we have been involved with are happening in local communities where you regain the power around being local and where all the products are truly local. I mean, if I go back to Lowe's, as I referred back to previously, we were teaming up with more than 600 local suppliers in each of the local different states and actually just almost selling local products in this supermarket, even though it's a national chain. And I think this is my point back to you. You are right that commoditization is happening big way. That is where global brand will suffer. But what you'll also see is as long as you infuse a local community-based message into the product, whether that's designed to the local market or it's catering for a very local need, commoditization is not disappearing. And the best example I can give to you is some of the work we did in Japan. In Japan, as you know, noodles are very popular. And you can go to all sorts of different noodles bars, and there's more than 300,000 noodle bars across Japan. So what the largest noodle manufacturer did was they said, let's team up with the local chefs of each of those local noodle bars and create local recipes for each of them. And then literally created you could say a private label line, 300,000 different private label lines, which had the portrait of the local chef in that local noodle bar with the local flavor, the local secret recipe, and distributing it through that local store. And guess what? They're still the number one player. No one can enter the market, and they're never becoming a commodity because they're using the power of local and community. I think that's where you have a challenge, because you need to figure out what is the local voice I can have. And it cannot just be a localized banner ad on Facebook or some of that stuff. It has to have a profound impact on the actual product and the service as well. If you do that, then you'll see commoditization will not happen.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I mean, I'm sure that what you just said will resonate a lot in the organization, because at the end of the day, this is what we are all for. You know, we are a technical center of a global company in Brazil serving the LA consumers, And our mission is to indeed understand the local consumer need and design the product to go with them. Now, I'm sure that if our top management is hearing that global brands will disappear, this will be shocking. I mean, but I think your point is right. We need to make sure that our brands and products serve the regional needs before serving the global need. I liked it very, very much. I think this was the last question we had for you. I mean, we really appreciated your time. I again want to apologize, I mean, for 2 weeks ago where we had these technical problems and we had to cancel last minute. But you know what? The good thing for you is that you are in Switzerland. You can go back to your glass of wine. I cannot take wine yet in Brazil, all right? So I need to wait for a couple of hours. So enjoy your night. Thank you very, very much for this very inspiring speech. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph. Thanks both of you, and thanks to all of you guys. Right? Bye.